So today I would like to share my research findings about Taiwanese transitional justice. My discipline is comparative politics and regional studies. So in my paper, not only covering the current Taiwan TJ policy to the obvious and the main target in the February 28 incident and the White Terror, but also extending our interest in claims and movements related to social trauma, such as the issue of historical justice advocated by the indigenous people, while also factoring other historical issues within Taiwan society. I would like to conduct microscopic description on the chain development process of the multi-layered TJ in Taiwan. In doing so, I hope to position and locate Taiwan case within the context and discourse of TJ that is actually taking place around the world, which will then in turn demonstrate the universality as well as the peculiarity of the case of TJ in contemporary Taiwan. TJ is a concept that indicates the legal and political mechanisms that serves the purpose of facing a negative past of institutional violence or human rights infringement in the hope of overcoming and reconciling social trauma. Specifically, it refers to mechanisms such as investigating the truth of such traumatic events, prosecuting responsible parties, compensating the victims, and the reforming of the political system to prevent such atrocity from repeating itself. TJ as a field of study following the democratization of Latin America in the 1980s, along with the spread of the third wave democratization of the post-Cold War era. It is a relatively new field that has been gaining attention from policymakers and scholars, both domestically and internationally. However, studies on TJ so far seldom feature Asian region, and including Japan or Taiwan as a subject of interest. Before we begin, I would like to reaffirm the models of TJ. TJ has so far been categorized as to having two major types. One being the transitioning into a democratic polity, such as a state from Latin America and Eastern Europe. It called the post-dictatorship model. And another being the resolving the civil wars and conflict and the building of peace afterwards. It calls the post-conflict model. However, from the 2000s up till now, in settled states such as Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, there has been a phenomenon of attempting to deal with historical injustice imposed upon the indigenous people through TJ mechanism. A lot of prior research have closely examined such cases while critically inspecting the effectiveness of the concept of TJ and analyze how democratic nations that have had colonialism past have transitioned to the state of internal colonialism through a TJ mechanisms. In other words, the model of TJ consists of first, the post-dictatorship model, where one transition from an authoritarianism or totalitarianism polity to a democratic one. Second, the post-conflict model, where an already democratic nation faces the issues of peace building due to civil war or internal conflict. And third, it's a post-colonial model, where there is an unresolved historical injustice regarding past colonial rule with indigenous people within a past colony or between a past colony and colonizer. And therefore, it could be said that there are in fact three models of TJ. As the following historical event can be observed in Taiwan, such as the Imperial Japanese colonial rule, the Pacific War, the Chinese Civil War, the February 28 incident, and human rights violation of the White Terror under the Kempty authoritarian rule, it could be said that modern history of Taiwan is formed with one layer of numerous different state violences after another. Furthermore, thinking in terms of context the majority Han ethnic immigrants come from, Taiwan as a settled state, as previously mentioned, also has its post-colonial issue of the restoration of indigenous rights. Consequently, TJ in Taiwan operate on the level of all three models. TJ that exist in such multi-layered chain in the sense where numerous historical issues occur simultaneously or continuously, hold a certain degree of universality, and can be seen in other Asian countries such as Korea, the Democratic Republic of East Timor, and so on. Moreover, similar to Taiwan's case, Korea's TJ also embody the legacy of the divided state caused by the Cold War. In this sense, Taiwan's case truly exhibits the inherent causes as other East Asian regions. Generally speaking, the main goals for TJ is the social reconciliation, deepening democracy, and securing human rights. And in terms of the normative implication about TJ, Ruti title in her pioneering work on TJ related to the context democratization from authoritarian regimes called the important function of law in the process of reviewing the past, a paradigm shift in the conception of justice. It says that while the function of law in ordinary period focused on the role of ensuring social order and stability, but the law in transition rather has the function of building a normative shift in the understanding of justice in the society. By the way, some qualitative empirical analysis to date has shown skepticism about the effectiveness of TJ mechanisms such as trial, truth-telling, reparation, and apologies. This view may follow the phenomenon that from the late 1980s to the 1990s, domestic and international attempt to pursue TJ, centering on retributive justice, seem to reach a certain breaking point. However, recent quantitative studies have shown that the stereotypical policy evaluation of TJ as a trade-off between democracy and justice or a trade-off between peace and justice is two-dimensional, at least with regard to the post-dictatorship model cases. Some quantitative study identified democracy and human rights as the ultimate goals of TJ and used Polity for and Freedom House for Democracy and the PTS Political Terror Scale and the CIRI Project for Human Rights as indicators to examine the impact of the most important TJ mechanism. The implement of trial truth commissions, amnesty before and after democratization. And then it found that the TJ mechanism is always positive for democracy and human rights guarantee only when it is combined with a trial and amnesty. On the other hand, if we examine the determinants of TJ from the perspective of the question of when regime voluntarily seek to promote TJ, accountability and legitimacy can be raised as an important point of view. In democracies, accountability at various levels is often challenged in response to human rights violations, such as physical violence caused by the abuse of power by government officials, police, and other law enforcement agencies against citizens. In such cases, the state power charged with accountability strengthens the legitimacy of its governance through reform that increase accountability. Therefore, TJ projects that seek to address the past negative legacy of large-scale human rights violation by the state have merit for implementation on side of political power in that they have the utility of restoring or procuring state legitimacy. TJ accountability reform, Lester justice of acknowledgement and recognition of victims and survivors who have been marginalized by the past state wrongdoings. In this way, it will repair the social cleavage created by the state violence and promote social integration. Of course, the administration's active adoption of TJ is not always in a positive light, such as such as accountability reform. There can be a case of hijacked justice in which domestic political elites manipulate the concept of TJ as an international norm to justify their own action and belief and attempt to achieve political gains by instrumentalizing TJ mechanism. thus spoiling its original purpose. In these cases, the legitimacy of the regime is instead diminished, meaning that TJ will not bring about social change. So let's move on to the analysis of Taiwan's case. I think the Taiwan state of exception as a non-recognized country shapes the peculiarity of Taiwan's case. What I mean by the state of exception is in terms of the sovereignty of its polities and people from the past to the present. In the modern history of Taiwan, and up till this very moment, Taiwan society has then faced numerous types of state violence, while its sovereignty has been in a certain state of exception. As commonly known, the ROC government in Taiwan has a history of being a part of a split China due to the Chinese Civil War. It is important to remember, and it is important to remember that Taiwan during the Japanese colonial rule was in a state of exception as well, that the Meiji Constitution was not completely implemented. And after half of a century of Japanese rule, being caught in the crossfire of the Chinese Civil War steered them away from the possibility of implementing a local government system and led them to a state of proxy decolonization under the authoritarian rule of a KMT. So it could be said that Taiwan's exceptional stateness would make a strong motivation for normalization of its incomplete sovereignty in its society. Commonly speaking, a state of exception is when a country is invaded by another or some emergency situations for the sake of national security. Constitutional rights are suspended by the political power. In fact, if we reflect on Taiwan's modern history, Taiwan's sovereignty before and after World War II has been suspended in a multi-layered state of exception, which in the process of democratization has partially been normalized, while some of its layers have been remained and embedded in both of international and domestic legal system as a paradigm of government in the society so far. In terms of specific development of TJ policy, the process of reviewing the past regarding the 228 incident and the White Terror that occurred under KMT authoritarian rule first began after the Li Denghui administration. Then, after two peaceful change of government in the 2000 and 2008, coupled with the deepening of the democratization, the policy of apology and compensation for the victims by the head of state has taken root. So the framework of apology and compensation, which was developed by the first president Li Denghui after democratization as the basic policy of TJ, was succeeded by the subsequent administrations of Chen Shui-bian of the DPP and Ma Ying-jeou of the KMT. However, due to the lack of legal mechanism for investigating the truth, criminal prosecution, and restoration of victims, there were no formal truth and reconciliation commissions, clarification of responsibility of government officials, or a lawsuit to restore honor of the former political prisoners. Therefore, since democratization, the legacy of the old regime formalized in current laws has been a major implemented to justice. Specifically, the national security law, which prohibited the right of appeal in criminal conviction cases against political prisoners before the lifting of martial law. And constitutional interpretation, some constitutional interpretations that deem the said law constitutional have ensured the stable, constitutional, and legitimacy of some of the legal norms of the former martial law regime. In addition, the persistence of authoritarian symbol like name of place, statues, monuments, and memorial hall still in public spaces, and the conflicting different historical memories regarding past historical issues manifested the different historical views that remain in Taiwan society. In addition, revisionist statements by some politicians giving a positive assessment of the authoritarian regime and the past of the White Terror or denying the number of victims provoked strong dishonest and condemnation from the public, including the intellectuals and human rights advocacy groups. This has often led to a deepening of the social cleavage over historical issues. And after that, under the administration of President Tsai Ing-wen since 2016, when the DPP gained 完全执政, in administration and legislation, the TJ-related legislation and a series of policies were developed as an attempt to legally overcome the institutional remnants of the party-state system. As a comprehensive and epoch-making legislations for the disclosure of official documents during the martial law period, the removal of authoritarian symbols, and measure against the illegality of the martial law period judicial system, there have been a certain result in the disclosure, collection, arrangement, and analysis of political archives, and the rescinding of final judgment in past political trials. Since 2018, the TJ Commission under the Executive Yuan has published a list of victims who were alleged to be former political prisoners convicted in the February 28 incident and the White Terror, and announced the revocation of their convictions in accordance with the provision of the Act on Promoting TJ. And in 2020, a judicial ruling was issued in an effort to overcome the negative legacy of the party-state system under KMT through legislation and administration. In interpretation number 793, the Supreme Court ruled that part of the law related to the ill-gotten property, including retroactive effect and mandatory provision, constitutional. The Supreme Court declared the long-term martial law regime of the ROC government an illegal and unjust past, which was contrary to the liberal, democratic, and constitutional order, and seriously violates fundamental rights, and that the legal stability and predictability of the authoritarian regime were unworthy of a principle of faith and trust, so need to be correct. Furthermore, the scope of the TJ has also extended to the issue of the restoration of historical rights of Taiwanese indigenous people who have been deprived of their land and autonomy, similar to the settler states such as Australia and Canada on indigenous people. August 1, Indigenous Peoples Day, August 1, 2016, soon after her assumption of office, presidential office, Tsai Ing-wen became the first president of ROC to officially apologize for the prosecution of Taiwan's indigenous people. She also announced the establishment of the Indigenous Historical Justice and TJ Committee in the presidential office. So there are two driving forces of TJ in Taiwan. From discourses analysis of the conception of TJ in Taiwan, we can find that the chain reaction between TJ movement and policies has developed in the two-directional interaction from above and below. First, the action from below in civil society is the grassroots radical democracy practice that pursues their own justice, often denying official reconciliation or forgetting imposed by the government. In my point of view, in Taiwan, the multi-ethnic group society, that is also a state of exception. These kind of radical democracy movements by the different ethnic groups with different issues of overcoming the past, such as 2020 incident, the White Terror, and restoration of indigenous people. These movements are often linked and followed by the other movements, one after another, through the discourse of 创新正义 as a nodal point, and thus function internally as a national integrating idea that bring different ethnic groups together, and externally as a soft power that promotes the legitimacy of a free and democratic Taiwanese polity. In other words, Taiwan's TJ is a process in which Taiwan identity becomes more of a social consensus, and the member of a multi-ethnic society faces a negative history of each ethnic group by sharing other tragedy to build a common historical justice that can be shared with others. In terms with the chain development of TJ movement by the different promoting actors, in the first place, TJ in Taiwanese society was first pursued by victims' family and the advocacy groups such as 228 Peace Day Association and the Taiwan Human Rights Association, which has been promoting democratization since the martial law period. Long before the conception of TJ was imposed into Taiwanese society as a political slogan after 2000s, they have been campaigning for investigation into the past, reparation by the government, and apology from political leaders. Next, it was a grassroots movement among the indigenous people that tried to introduce the conception of TJ as a matter of post-colonial historical justice for them. The first time the case for TJ of indigenous people came into being was in 2008, when the police forcibly eliminated human hunting activities in the traditional territory of Puyuma people in Taiwan country. And 228, the smoke signal actions jointly started in eastern Taiwan. In recent years, their campaign has adopted slogans such as 228 and TJ, symbolically and rhetorically, indicating the problem of the indigenous people also must be dealt with as well of the KMT authoritarian issues. Thus, it can be said that the reason why President Tsai Ing-wen apologized to the indigenous people on behalf of the government in 2016 and why she promoted TJ for the indigenous people actually was because of the TJ movement of the indigenous people promoting for nearly 10 years before. Another civic movement that advocate for historical justice and the preservation of Taiwan's memory by introducing the conception of TJ is the Taiwanese veteran movement, which demand reparation and commemoration for the Taiwanese Japan veterans who were mobilized as Japanese soldiers and engaged in operation during the World War II, and then engaged in military operation as a member of the National Army of ROC after that. Some of them were captured by the CCP and even fought in the Korean War as member of the Liberation Army. This movement was initiated by Xu Zhaorong and other Taiwanese veterans from 1990s. In November 2016, President Tsai Ing-wen became the first president of ROC since democratization to attend the commemoration ceremony for the Taiwanese old soldier. And in her speech, she made remarks to the effect that the pursuit of historical justice for a Taiwanese soldier will inevitably lead to the promotion of TJ for the indigenous people. Externally, this was also contributes to strengthening the legitimacy of Taiwan's democratic polity and sovereignty towards China, an authoritarian power that seeks to take over Taiwan. In fact, the statements made by the Taiwanese government or press release since the 2000 indicate that the experience of TJ in Taiwan has had the effect of communicating externally to the international community centered on Europe and the United States, and to the government of the PRC by emphasizing the legitimacy of the ROC rule as a democratic and liberal polity. In other words, Taiwan's TJ has the potential to be extended to cross-strait relations, a problem of unfinished TJ, post-conflict model that remained from the Chinese Civil War. On the other hand, we can also observe the problem of hijacked justice by successive Taiwanese administration in TJ in Taiwan. The Chen Shui-bian administration, which was a minority ruling party and had a weak base of power, failed to take effective measures on TJ. And in its second term, after losing the support of civil society due to corruption scandals, the government was criticized for policies that divided public opinion, such as forcing the correct name campaign to remove Chiang Kai-shek name from public prosperity, and it was criticized for using it for his election campaign. After that, in Ma Ying-jeou administration, he attended the commemoration ceremony of the 28 incident almost every year during his term as mayor of Taipei and after his retirement from presidential office, and frequently apologized for the incident during his presidency. At the same time, however, he has continued to visit Chiang Kai-shek gravesite, Taoyuan, Zhihu, every year around the Qingmingjie, and has actively played the achievement of Chiang Jing-kuo at commemorative events. Interestingly, the positive evaluation of the leaders of authoritarian regime has been carried over to the Thai administration, as evidenced by the commendation of former Executive Yuan President Hao Bo-chun and her attendance at the opening ceremony of the Chang Jingguo Memory Facility to publicly praise his achievement. In order to achieve national integration in a multi-ethnic society, Taiwan's political leaders seem to be required to have an attitude of not excluding the historical views of other ethnic groups with different historical experiences. In other words, although it seems that in order to promote national integration in a multi-ethnic society, Taiwan's political leader needed to adopt a two-side strategy of commemorating the 228 incident and white terror as a past that the nation should reflect on, while appreciating the authoritarian leaders. However, this was perceived by the victim's family and advocacy group as a dishonest and duplicitous response that kept lid on the truth of history, and the mechanism of apology and commemoration had limited effect on reconciliation. Indigenous people also, who demand land and autonomy based on traditional practice, have also criticized the TJ policies of successive administration for just only in name. Also, despite the disclosure of such material and the result of positive historical research, there are some public opinion poll results that raise question about the extent to which Taiwanese society in general are able to face historical facts and the level of its own perceptions. For example, in a June 2018 poll conducted by Meridao Election News, a web media company established by Xu Xinliang in 2009, the following question was asked: among the past presidents, who do you think was most capable of upholding or representing Taiwan value? A political slogan raised by President Tsai Ing-wen administration. During their term in office, the percentage of respondents who answered Chang Jingguo was a whopping 43%, triple the score of the second place Li Denghui at 13.8%. In addition, an undisclosed poll conducted by the DPP in September 2021 showed that 54% of respondents opposed the removal of the state statue of Chiang Kai-shek at the Zhongzheng Jiniantan, for far exceeding that 37% who were in favor. Needless to say, the policy of TJ in modern Taiwan has been gradually promoted by the public authorities, driven by the strong grassroots movement of victims and their families, and it has developed based on a certain level of public opinion. However, it may not be easy for a society that has been ruled by an oppressive regime for a long time to relativize its own authoritarian values. Now, I've got to wrap up my presentation as my conclusions. I would like to show my point of view about TJ in Taiwan. It is part of Taiwanization of ROC, has a significance of the moving towards democratic normalization of the sovereignty of the polity and its people. The citizens of Taiwan, of course, it includes the indigenous people. In contemporary Taiwan, issues of different model of TJ, each with its own historical backgrounds and the political agenda, form the particularity that the issues have been gradually raised and developed in a chain of events, forming a certain linkage structure. In fact, different models of attempt at TJ have been undertaken in stage since democratization in Taiwan, as if to follow the trend of expanding the scope of TJ in other areas of the world. So there are two driving power of TJ. One is the radical democracy movements. The other is the policy the government would take. The various movements by the different ethnic group with different issues of overcoming the past would be often linked or followed by the other movements one after another through the discourse of Transitional as a nodal point. Furthermore, such TJ movements are incorporated into the official status as policy by the government to some degree, as the basis for the political community based on the common historical justice of the island. Thus, it also plays an important role as a political resource for enhancing the legitimacy of its rule by the government internally and externally. This is my presentation. Thank you.